Eliminating that context switching is critical. You can think that context switching basically means any case where you might change the way in which you're acting in order to do something for, say, reviewing output that instead of writing some input. And just the process of moving your focus of your window focus or moving your mouse, all of these constitute context switching that genuinely, when you look at the motion study results of somebody's work, genuinely actually slows people down. Similarly, you can see that I find that the context switching of doing a :W operation, switching between insert mode and this command mode, is actually going to slow me down. So I actually have a Vim normal mode shortcut. So I can basically just press escape and then run the code directly. Here, of course, it won't run because this is some Vim code, but you can see there it's, just doing a less on my autorunner there. Actually, it opened up Vim here. My autorunner is very sophisticated. I don't know if that's going to blow it up in some weird way. But think about this. Even this operation is clumsy because I could fat finger this. I could accidentally go like that, and then I've fallen out of my rhythm. In general, what I'm looking for in order to reduce context switching where I do need to do something is an interplay between what we might call fine actions and gross actions. This is something you may have seen anytime you talk about automation. Fundamentally, at its core, automation is the interplay between gross actions, actions which are not particularly well targeted, and fine actions, actions which are very well targeted. For example, when you are cooking dinner for 100 people, do you peel every potato and then within those potatoes dice them up and then mash them up and then go to the next potato? Of course not. You peel all the potatoes all at once, which is a very gross action. If you think about it, you're basically lopping off as much as you can, and if you want to move really quickly, you don't even use the potato peeler. You just cut off a side. You accept some loss in the process in order to turn what is otherwise a fine motor control action into a gross motor control action, which is just bring the hammer down or bring the knife down on each piece. Then you progressively move to finer actions. But in automation, it's not the case that you always go from gross actions to fine actions. It's typically the case you'll go from gross actions to fine actions and then back up to gross actions and then down to fine actions. And you'll see, even with your context switching, what we're looking for in order to minimize the pain of a necessary context switch is the grossest possible action, the broadest possible action. So something that does not require fine motor control, something that's as simple as jamming 2 keys on my keyboard that are very large and are easy to hit. In fact, I have somewhere here a foot pedal. At some point in the near future, I'm just going to get my foot pedal so I can just jam my foot down in order to run that autorunner, because I can't think of anything that, I don't think I'm going to stumble and fall if I do that. I can't think of anything that is a larger scale action without requiring fine motor control than using, say, a foot pedal. It is the case that you might even eliminate actions like that in total. Here is a Vim snippet that allows you to implement auto-saving. For the most part, I'm actually somebody who believes in maybe even eliminating this, but understand that you cannot eliminate context switching completely. I found in practice that using auto-saving instead of some gross action for triggering the output actually adds more noise to the process, especially since it's generally the case that I can't usually tighten the iteration loop tight enough to allow for lots of spurious character level reruns. When I say that the iteration loop should be about the speed of or slightly faster than the speed of our action, I don't mean an action of typing one character on the keyboard. I mean an action of writing one line of code, which is usually like 2-3 seconds for me. Well, if I turn on an autosaver and I'm doing it at the granularity of each character, this actually adds significantly more noise to my process, and it actually is just too inefficient. So there are some limits to this idea. Here you can see, actually I'll get to this in a moment, but I want to talk about our next core principle. Our next core principle is the principle of decomposition. Here you can see a starting point for a problem that I need to solve. We have our star trader problem, and in our star trader problem, we need to work on some kind of data, like some kind of trading data where different players fly around to different stars in the solar system and they trade in each one of these pieces of equipment. And as part of one of my outstanding tasks, I need to improve the quality of this data because I'm giving a presentation in just a couple of days where I need to use this data. And unfortunately, the previous formulations created artifacts in the data that were not that interesting to analyze. When I'm looking at a task like this, one of the most important things that I look for is decomposing the task into parts. This is very similar to the idea of isolation. Effectively, when you look at my coding environment here, or my presentation environment, you see that I have the ability to write fenced code blocks, and in those fenced code blocks to do just a tiny bit of work and then bring that together in one block. You might think, oh, that's just how you do a presentation so you can see all the notes. This is actually genuinely how I write code. And the reason for that is, if I had some issue with this star trader data, for example, I was curious about constructing, say, a multi-index from the assets and the stars. I'll even just do that. It may very well be the case that I need to play with small incremental items individually. For example, I need to just say, okay, I want to create the multi-index. Does this create the multi-index properly when I do a from product, passing it the assets and the stars? And we can see that's my multi-index there, and there's something seems to be a little bit wrong about that. So I might put some names on this. This actually did get printed out very, very dodgy, although that could be consequence of some other process here. But let's actually force a redraw here. You can see sometimes these things. There we go. There we go. We needed to reset our console there. But you can see here, okay, that works. And then I might do like an index.getLevelValues to check something out. I'm going to isolate the work that I do, and I'm going to decompose the problem into smaller parts. It's often the case that this star trader data isn't just dummy data that we use for the purpose of presentations. It's actually dummy data that we use for the purpose of doing actual work. Not exactly this data, but it's not unusual that as part of the decomposition of a problem, I'll decompose the data loading and data formulation and the data analysis such that I'll do data analysis for a real-world problem on dummy data that is approximately the same shape and approximately the same fields as the real data. Because ultimately, I don't really want to have to worry about, okay, what's the name of the column from the database? Is this a pandas data? Is this a pandas date time? Is it a Python date time? Is it a string? Do I have to do all those details? I want to decompose a problem into smaller parts. And the way I'll genuinely do that is I'll have some environment where I can write very small pieces of code at the level of snippets. Here, I don't care about this import because all I'm going to do is just prototype one tiny piece here and then bring that piece up together in the total script. I find that most coding environments don't really give this to you. You can synthesize something like this in, for example, Vim or Emacs with anonymous buffers. But in your Visual Studio Code, all you can really do is create a new file, but then you have to save it, and you have a bunch of these scratch files over the place. This is one thing where I think that the historical text editors are actually better coding environments than your fully fledged IDEs. The ability to create very small anonymous blocks of code to try just one individual decomposed part of the problem, get that working, and then bring it up. And you'll often see that I'll do that. I'll say, oh, hold on a second. What is the method on that multi-index? Well, I don't want to run all that code to see what all those methods on that multi-index are, because who knows how long the rest of that code does. Let me just have a simple import here, or what's the name of that import? I'll just create a quick block here, check that out, and then go up to the top. And so what you'll see is, nicely as an artifact of this, I capture some details of the development process, but I have one cell that has the accumulation of all the code, and then I have the individual decomposed units of it that I've built up towards. This decomposition oftentimes allows me to work very, very quickly. In fact, another aspect of this decomposition is understand that the production environment in which we deploy our code is oftentimes not really written for fast iteration.